The 1031 exchange is a tax deferring process allowed by the IRS where you sell one asset and roll those proceeds into another asset without ever being taxed on the capital gains from the sale. And there's really no limit to how many times you can do it. But you have to close on the property within 180 days of the sale of the other property. And you have to identify the targets that you are going to attempt to buy within 45 days. So those are some of the things that I think about when we're coming up on the end of an investment: cash everybody out or carry a 1031 into a new property.
Hello, welcome back to the Get Invested podcast. We're glad to be with you today. I am, as always, Jordan Stone, host, and I am joined, of course, by my co-host, Matthias. I think we got two big burning questions before we jump into our topic today, Matthias. One, I'm sure everyone's wondering, is Bailey figuring things out? And then I'll get to the next one, which is going to be obvious for anybody who's watching what that next question is going to be. But go ahead. Tell us about Bailey right now.
I would say that she has been figuring some things out, but I think we took a significant step back last night. There was poo, there was pee, kennels, multiple kennels, lots of backsliding going on last night, and frustration in the Wilson household. So,
and as we were raised Baptist, backsliding. Got to always look out for it.
Yeah, so we really don't know. We've got her checked out. There's no actual physical issues. It's all just behavioral, and for some reason she is just refusing to subscribe to the rules of the house in terms of bathroom use.
Now, so, I'm assuming that Bailey's backsliding is not affecting, Ethan or Aaron's own.
No, they're behaving. Now they're
abiding by the rules.
They're
of the
at
house.
least attempting to, yeah.
Yeah. They're not like, wait a second, she doesn't have to do it.
Nope. No, they're not. Thank goodness. That would be, my house already smells bad enough. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, that would be funny though. I mean, I can just imagine he's a thinker. He's a pretty serious guy. He could be like, well, Dad, if Bailey doesn't have to. All right. Well, the next question, which is just something that's a bit of an update and fun to make sure just to chat about, as all things office based are. Matthias, if you're watching, it looks like he's sitting in a blank void, and that's sort of true, but not entirely. So, Matthias, tell us what's up with this new location.
Yeah, so I'm kind of subletting an office, off-site office, as it were. Got a little room in a local, just down the road. So they got a little office, little space that I'm going to make mine. Jen's tired of me usurping her desk for any calls or podcasting that I do, because the window's behind my desk if I sit at my desk at home. Plus, it's nice to just get out of the house, get a little, I could obviously work from home if I needed to, but nice to have a little space to myself over here. Pretty cool. Got a little obviously there's no decoration. So there's gray walls and nothing up yet. I walked in and I built my desk yesterday, my new desk, which I like, but there's no other furniture in here, and aside from the chair that I'm sitting in. But I also realized how daunted I am at putting stuff up on the walls, and I kind of was like, all right, I need help for this. So I kind of went back, tail between my legs to Jen, and was like, yeah, I'm gonna need some inputs from a real person to help me put stuff up, because I thought back the last time I decorated something is definitely like my room when I was deployed, and I literally just taped up a KU flag and pictures of Ethan, and at that point was, well, I guess on my last deployment, I don't know, but basically like baby pictures and or natal pictures of the little ultrasound pictures or whatever. So I'm not known for my decorating abilities in terms of making it look professional and or adult.
Well, I would presume, having been to your home, that you know how to hang up things.
Oh, for sure. I know how to do that.
So you're not going to be taping anything.
No. It's more just the that part I can figure out. It's the putting what, where, and this should be centered. This should be because I have a bunch of like random cool knickknacks that I would like to hang up, but being able to know where to put stuff is probably going to be. I'm going to need some help with that. So my goal is to like get everything over here. Should say, Jen, where should I put this stuff? And she'll like put this here, that there, kind of stuff.
Do you have tile floors in there, or is it?
It's like LVP flooring.
My thing about getting a cheap rug just for the acoustics, just for the pod, just a little soften it a little bit. Yeah. It looks like you're really close to the wall. Is that just choice, or
that's I'm not? I'm up
there's
against
no perspective.
There's no exactly that's probably 6 feet behind me. Not 6 feet. It's like 4 feet or something.
Okay,
but it's not a huge room, but it does. It feels like I'm leaning up against it when I look at it. It's like it just knock.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like it's so perspectiveless. It's like you put up the most boring digital background you could possibly find.
With one little line over in the corner. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, guys, don't worry about me. The economics of the situation in Charlotte is gonna keep me here in this nice little cozy upstairs office of mine. I gotta think about maybe hanging. I decided not to hang stuff because there's a bunch of plants back there. And I didn't have enough room for the full complement of all my Carolina Championship stuff. So I kind of gave up on it and was just like, you know what? There's enough. There's diplomas, there's books, it's fine. But now if you're going to make a nice background, I mean, I'm going to have to switch it up a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'll just drag that bookcase right behind me and it'll just be me and the books. Anywho, we're focused more on practical things around here. I gotta tell you, I got a handheld stick battery powered vacuum cleaner, and it is. I
just saw one of those being advertised literally today. Like I was scrolling.
My God, this one's a Tenneco, no free ads, but still, like it has like 3 different ways you can use it, and it can just turn into like a handheld, just like a vacuum one, like literally one of the best things I've ever purchased. I mean, it's like engagement wedding rings, the vacuum cleaner, like underneath as far as like domestic bliss implications. Nice. I mean, especially with 3 floors, it's just like boop, 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 everything. It's so awesome. Oh my God. You should look into it, especially since you're having to clean up like every time there's like a little mess, you don't have to like drag out multiple things.
Sure. We used to have one of those little shark things, but its battery died pretty quick. Does it have like a port where you just where it recharges itself, or is it like straight up AA batteries?
But no. It's a big rechargeable battery that you just there's a whole thing you can hang. You can put it against the wall and hang it, and then plug it in. I'm not doing that right now because I have a stash in the closet. But the coolest thing about it is how like you can take it apart so easily. So honestly, I can just literally take the battery and plug it in anywhere, and it lasts like 45 minutes.
Nice.
50 minutes, like yeah,
that's good.
And so because it's energy efficient, like if it's not hitting a lot of dirt, it'll just like roll, and then as soon as it hits something, like the engine like ramps up. It's like, okay, cool. Let's get serious. Yeah. So I mean, it took not even one whole charge to clean, like a whole charge and then a little bit more to clean my whole 3 floors. It was and that, I mean, just the fact that like you don't have to you just grab it and then dump it out. But
nice.
Yeah, I'm so pumped. I actually got a shark in this one and compared the two, and the Tenneco was superior, like far and away. Okay. I sent the shark back. So
we need to get one. Yeah.
And now's a good time. I mean, I bought it on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and it was like, I don't know, like half or something. Anyways.
Sure.
All right, guys. As riveting as domestic pursuits are, I'm not gonna lie to you though. I mean, I know. Yeah, if people know this, if they know this life, like they're nodding their head right now because it is a game changer, especially for kids, man. Any kind of little mess that they make, you could just be like, anyways. All right. I'll leave my current war with my cat Wonder, who's declared war on my plants. I'll leave that for another time. Let's jump into, there's no segueing from what we were talking about to our topic today. So we're just going to period transition. We're going to talk about a really specific decision at a specific moment in the investment timeline today. So, and it's something that, I'm just going to be, I know as little about, honestly, as you guys do. So I'm going to be asking questions. There's no faking it this time as far as whether I know or not. So I'm just going to let Matthias get started here, and then we're gonna get into it.
Yeah. So basically, what we're going to talk about is the decision process for whether or not we're going to do a 1031 when we sell a property. So I get to properly cage it for you. Basically, the 1031 exchange is a tax deferring process, basically that allowed by the IRS, where you sell one asset and roll those funds, the proceeds from that, into another asset without ever being taxed on the capital gains from the sale. So basically defer the taxes, the gains, until you sell that next one, if you don't do a 1031 that time. And there's really no limit to how many times you can do it. But basically the thought process is that some of the caveats for the 1031 are the requirements in order to qualify for a 1031 exchange to avoid those taxes. Is one, you have to buy the new property within 6 months. You have to close on the property within 6 months, 180 days of the sale of the closing on the sale of the other property. They're very strict on that. That is, if you close at 181 days, then you are not qualified for a 1031, and it doesn't matter what you did, you will be taxed on the capital gains. So there's that. You must identify, and don't quote me on these exact numbers, but basically you have a specific time period. You have to identify 3 properties. I think it's 45 days post closing on the sale of the prior investment. You have to identify the targets that you're going to attempt to buy within 45 days. And you could be, I think it can be up to 3. There's different specifics that go into it, but basically you have to know what you're going to buy, identify it, or what you're going to go after, get it under contract, do all the normal buying stuff, and then close within that 180 days in order to keep the 1031 qualifying. So those are some of the things that I think about when we're coming up on the end of an investment, whether or not we're going to just sell it and cash everybody out, or try to do a 1031 into a new property. So we're allowed to do it. All of our paperwork is always written so that we're allowed to do a 1031 if we so choose. And there's basically carve outs and processes built into our paperwork, our LLC paperwork, for how we would run a vote if the investors want to do. They could vote, and I think our latest paperwork drawn up had it needed to be 60% or more vote in favor of a 1031 in order to do it. Something along those lines. I don't remember exactly, but basically we can do it in case it's beneficial to do. But there's a lot of calculations that need to go into it that we'll get into here before deciding whether or not it's actually appropriate to try to do it on any given sale of an investment.
Okay, so I have a few questions, but that 180 days is just off the top. That includes due diligence, right? Like you have to have
100%. Yeah, you have to close on the new property.
Close. Yeah. You don't have to not just offer, it's under works. Like everything has to be done.
Correct.
Right. Okay. All right. So that makes that timeline. Some people might think, oh, well, you got 6 months. That is not a lot of time if you're going to work through everything else. Now, I think we're probably going to get into some of these, but I'm interested to know at some point, you said, theoretically you could do it in perpetuity. You could just keep rolling over. What would that look like? Would it just be like you're continuing to get you're just using this to get a bigger property and a bigger property and a bigger property? Or how would, say you wanted to do it 3 times in a row? I know there's a lot of variables, but at some point people are going to be like, well, I would like to have some of the money. Or maybe they're like, you know what, just roll it into another another income generating thing. That's fine. I mean, it's just what would be the goal? You wouldn't want to just be like, okay, we bought the same kind of property, right? You would talk to me about that. What are you looking for in a 1031 if you're going to do it? Let's put it
typically what you're doing is you're preserving that stack of cash, and it's basically a tax-free investment for as long as you can keep the 1031 going. So that's one of the biggest capital gains tax, 10, 15%, 20%, depending on which tax bracket you're in, of all your proceeds. I mean, that's a big chunk taken off. Let's say you made 30%, but on that money, if we're axing 15% off of that, that's a big loss. So your money is not growing as fast as it potentially could. So that's one reason why you would keep doing it. But yeah, let's say you buy a property I'm just going to use some crazy, ballpark numbers, but let's say you buy a property for $1 million. You invest 200, you pooled $500,000 to buy $1 million property with investors. So those $500,000 investors, let's say you operate that property for a while, sell it for $2 million in 5 years, whatever. So now you've got about $1 million roughly of capital gains of value you've added there. So you could either pay 15%, 10%, 20%, whatever it is on that $1 million, or you say, let's say you roll it into that $2 million. Let's say you're probably carrying about $1.4 million of cash at that point, something like that. If in this scenario that we've dreamed up, so you take that 1.4 million and you use that to purchase, let's say, a $4 million property, right? You've got, it covers your down payment, everything, and your operating costs. And now you have a $4 million property that you effectively have only invested 500,000 to get, right? So now the cash flow on a $4 million property is significantly higher than a cash flow on a $2 million property, assuming that they, are operating correctly and so on. So your checks are going to get bigger and bigger. Obviously, your equity, you're not getting your money back unless there's some sort of refinance, which is what you can do. You can buy, kind of our business plan that we normally do. The first 3 years, we're going to add value and refinance and pull as much cash back. You could theoretically do that, and you could actually have all your cash back without ever capitalizing and realizing those gains. So there's ways to do it. You make it sound, I mean, when I talk like that, if you can make that work out, it's a no-brainer. Everybody would do it. However,
yeah.
That's right. Due to some of the restrictions we talked about. Like, that's hard. That's really hard to do. So basically, in a 1031 scenario, you almost have to have identified you have to know what you're going to be able to sell your property for, ballpark. You have to know what you're looking at. You kind of have to identify the property you're going to buy almost before you sell the first one. You know what I mean?
That was something I was going to ask. Like, do you just go ahead and start looking once you put it on the market, or even before that? You're like, okay, if this sells, here are some prospective ones that we can offer on.
Yeah, so you're pretty much doing them simultaneously. You're going, okay, I'm going to make offers as I put mine on the market, and so so all these things are going to depend on market conditions, right? So if it's a good time to buy but a bad time to sell, maybe that could go into your yeah. So you could be maybe you want to hang on to that property longer because you don't want to, you know what I mean? You don't want to miss out on opportunity to have a better investment. So a lot of times I've heard it described as kind of the tail wagging the dog. It's like, yes, we want to have tax savings, but that can't be your only reason for selling or buying a property. You need to be able to have a kind of a clear mind to make a real investment decision and then maximize the tax gains that you can. So if you're presented with the kind of golden opportunity to do it, sure, let's look at it. But a lot of times it's hard to get all those different factors to line up appropriately, and you just have to. I mean, sometimes you just have to have a deal. You know what I mean? Like if there's no deals, and I haven't seen a good deal for a long time, I wouldn't have a lot of confidence going into selling a property doing a 1031 if all I've looked at is kind of bad deals, bad market conditions on in terms of buying a deal, starting an investment. It's like I don't want to buy a bad investment just to do a 1031. You know what I mean?
Right. You don't want to buy a suboptimal property just so you can avoid some taxes. Like, you
don't want to lower the criteria standards.
Yeah. I mean, best case scenario, you break even with a lot of headache. Worst case scenario, you end up losing way more money than you did in taxes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or you just stall out the money and it's like, yeah, well, theoretically, if you don't buy a value add, maybe you 1031 into what you anticipate is going to be a cash flow machine. Well, now, and let's say it doesn't quite perform the same way. Now, all those checks that everybody was getting on the other property that you sold because it was operating and humming along, now they're sitting looking at you going, okay, we did this 1031. You said, hey, let me hang on to your money, and because theoretically we're going to get a lot bigger checks for the same amount that we already had, and now we're just kind of sitting here looking at twiddling our thumbs and nothing's going on. So those are some of the risks.
Nah, yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah. So it's good to talk about the risk. I mean, most importantly, honestly, especially because the timing, like you say, like that's. I mean, you've got to have all the pieces in place beforehand just to make an attempt at it. Not like, oh, it's all ready to go. It's just like, okay, it's ready so that we can do this mad scramble.
Yeah,
Basically.
pretty much. Yeah, because it's going to be you. I mean, let's say you're marketing your property for a sale, and you're saying, okay, the market might be good, might be a good condition for a 1031. So you can start looking at, hey, what size or price range of property, what kind of capital commitment. Like, if you know generally what you're going to get for your property, you never know exactly, but if you have a pretty good idea and you're pretty confident it's going to sell, then you can go, okay, you take, like I talked about earlier, you take that money that you estimate that the cash you're going to have, and then that's going to have to be enough. Or theoretically, you could always add more cash, like do an additional raise, but that gets pretty complicated too. If I'm taking prior investors, find a specific pile of money and adding more money to it, that can be very complicated. So let's say that I have to identify the property or the range of properties and go start looking right away, and then obviously the timing has to work. Like, what happens if we get delayed under contract on the first one, and then the money's not ready for the, you know what I mean? Like, you could run into timing troubles a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah, trying to raise, you would have so many timelines at the same going on. Yeah. Now, it has to be one property, right? You can't roll it into multiple.
There's things you can do. I don't want to misspeak because there's experts who do this, and it gets very, very complicated. But it has to be owned by the same LLC. You could put a portfolio, theoretically sell, as long as the LLC is the entity that is doing the 1031. Say, let's say we'll call it ABC Properties is what we call the LLC that investors bought into on the first time. Well, ABC Properties has to be the selling of the asset and buying of the asset or assets, and the entity stays the same. So yeah, theoretically you could put multiple in, but that gets kind of like what happened in.
Yeah, but I mean, Heritage Cove is kind of like that, right? Like it's multiple different.
Yeah, we bought it as one
physical properties and bought it as one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, well that would probably start getting a little bit. You would have to be buying separate properties from like the same person, because otherwise.
Not necessarily. I think you can literally do
complications.
It would be a massive undertaking to do, like,
if you were like dealing with three sellers,
closings, two completely different negotiations, and trying to close all at the. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what you're up against when you're looking at this. So it would have to be like a perfect size property to make it to go smoothly. It would be the perfect size property that you didn't need any extra cash for and was available, and you could get under contract for that amount. So it's a tough, but I mean, people do it. It's a common thing, but a lot of times it'll be like a fund that's doing a 1031, because there's a lot less. It's a lot less. It's expected more. Like the investors aren't looking at that as an individual investment. They know they've invested in a fund, and a fund can do it, and it's a lot easier because they anticipate that you're going to try to do this multiple times, the investors, without getting their cash back. So it's different than a syndication, than a specific deal syndication where hey, this is exactly what we're going to try to accomplish.
Okay, that's an interesting kind of combination of another topic for a later time about a different way to invest. But yeah, that's sure. Maybe once we get around to that topic, we'll bring it back. But I had a few more questions on this. That first of all, just so everyone's clear, when you refinance and get your original capital back, you don't have to pay anything on that.
Refinance is not a taxable offense.
Right.
A taxable offense. A taxable event. The IRS, every time you make money, the IRS gets angry.
Now we know how Matthias feels about things, but
yes.
Wow, that's like the Freudian slip. Yeah,
I do it on purpose because that's how, to me, that's how the IRS looks at everything. They get angry when you're making money. They need to be paid.
It's really not okay. Anywho, so the ideal situation then is you refinance. You have your capital back. The property is sold. Everybody has a percentage equity in the cash, right? Even though their original cash is not in there, right?
Right.
And you walk that pile of cash, like let's just say everything's going perfectly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have the perfect property, it's twice the size or whatever. Due diligence is going swimmingly, blah, blah, blah. Everything's going to work out. You walk that pile over and you use that as the down payment and to qualify for the loan, essentially, right? So you get a new loan with this cash for the bigger property.
Yeah. The loan is specific to the property. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm just saying, like,
Because
it's
when you
not like
sell the
you buy
property, you're
it
paying off the
outright.
loan. That's where
Yeah, yeah. So,
yeah,
but you're not going
100%.
to
I mean,
walk over
you
and buy
theoretically
it with
could,
just cash.
you could, but that would be,
Well, not if
you'd lose.
in your scenario you were saying you're going to get a bigger property, right, or a more valuable one. So presumably, you didn't sell one for the same price as the one you're purchasing.
Right. Yeah, because you're trying to build, right? Because otherwise, why would you have sold if you're going to do the exact same thing? It doesn't make any sense. You're just transacting to be transacting.
Right. So, say I have 10% of the just to keep numbers simple. I have 10% of the original property as an investor.
Mm-hmm.
I gave you what was that? I gave you 50. Actually, I gave you 50,000 of the 500, right?
Sure.
So I got my 50 back, and then you said it would have like at this point if you sold for two, how much? I mean, after paying off the property, like the loan, how much would you have? Ballpark. I mean, obviously this is all.
It all depends, right? So if you refied and pulled a whole bunch of money out to pay that 500,000 back, so nobody's money is left in, so now you know you owe at least 500,000 plus probably
Sure.
a million. So maybe you're at 1.5. So you have maybe you sell for two, so you've got $500,000 of equity once you pay off that $1.5 million note that you refied into. So now you have 500,000 carrying forward of cash carrying forward to the next one, which you could use to do. I mean, you could theoretically go buy whatever you can afford with it, but yeah. So it depends on how the leverage went and how much equity you had. So ideally, you wouldn't carry the same original amount. Why not just pay the people back and go on? But it all depends, obviously.
No, I know. I'm trying to construct a scenario here where you said, okay, this is a 2 million. Then I'm trying to say, okay, talk us through if these numbers were real. We understand this is a scenario. You bought for one, you sold for two, you want to buy a four.
Yeah. So you would try to, I mean, it would probably take, in order to buy a four, depending on, I mean, you got to account for the down payment and whatever, reserves and reno costs you want to carry, all that, all the things that you normally need the cash for. You'd want to make sure that it falls into that. So you'd probably need 1.5 or more to buy that $4 million property of cash of capital contributed. So let's say you did carry that is the equity that you had. Let's say you didn't return any cash on the first one. So the note, let's say you still have the original note, maybe. So you have, maybe it's $800,000 note, and you sell the property for $2 million. Now you're carrying let's say 1.2. Okay, now we can go after the 4 million or 3.5 million, whatever dollar property. And your cash flow theoretically is going to be twice what it was on the $2 million property.
And in that instance, as 10%, I bought 10% of the bigger property with the 1.2.
You have the same claim to the equity that you always had. So yeah, exactly.
Right, so now I have 10% of a bigger property.
Exactly. It's like you're building the stack of equity is getting bigger and bigger.
Okay. Right. So, well, I mean, that's good to know how it would change. So I guess a lot of times if you're going to plan on doing a 1031, and that's like years after you would do a refi. I mean, you could also, I'm just thinking out loud here, obviously. Like, could you just ask for everybody, like, hey, you guys just want to put that money back in? If you'd already distributed it out, like, we're going to do this, like, can you that'd be your raise would be just from the same people giving the money back.
I mean, you could do it would basically be a capital call. Say, hey guys, if you put your money back in, we can go after this bigger property with a 1031 or whatever. You could 100% do that because you're allowed to do it in the paperwork. The problem is everybody would have to agree to do it and do it equally in order to preserve all the same. And I could get very, whenever I paid investors back their money, they invested in something else or buy a car or whatever it is, that they plan to do with that money. So it's not necessarily sitting around in everybody's bank accounts waiting.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean?
And so if some people buy back in and some people don't, then some people's equity is going to, it's going to dilute. And
then it gets complicated, very complicated, because you've got to effectively, buy out some people, which there's provisions to do. But again, all of this is it really going to be worth it in the long run to do all this extra kind of caveats and carve outs and do that versus just taking the money, saying, cool, you'll get the capital gains. However, if you do reinvest that money, in that same year, the money I gave you, I can give you we go buy another property just completely separate syndication, and you get a big write-off, and that helps battle the capital gains that I just gave you anyway. So if you're reinvesting, it's not quite a 1031. Obviously, you're deferring all the taxes, but you can wipe out a significant amount of taxes by reinvesting the same year, doing a depreciation and all the things that we do, the tax advantages that we get. So
it seems like a 1031 is definitely a very particular situation.
Mm-hmm. And something else that I need to, when I'm considering selling a property and toying with the idea of a 1031, I got to think about the individual investors, but also their particular objectives, right? If their goal is to keep building over the long term, they don't want to touch this money again for 10, 15, 20 years. Okay, maybe it makes sense. But are all my investors going to be in that same basket? Some of them might be a little bit older and they just want to have cash flow, or they want to have, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't make sense for them to do. So it kind of needs, everybody's goals, investment objectives need to align in order to make that work. And maybe we've had investors who are like, yeah, and they took what we gave them from an investment and they started a business. So it's like, okay, I'm not helping them if I do 1031 and they never get their money back. Even if I'm growing that money into a bigger stack, it doesn't fulfill their objective. So those are some things. And I, having the type of syndications that we do, the 506B, that requires me to establish a relationship with the investors, I know their situations, right? Like, so I know, hey, 1031 probably doesn't make a lot of sense for them. This was their first ever investment. Their tax bracket is negligible, so it's like they're not going to take, it was a small investment in the first place. It doesn't make sense to try to do a 1031 add complications. They'd rather, exactly. They'd rather just get their money back. It was cool because it's not going to change their tax status on the year. Now, on the other hand, if I had somebody who invested $250,000 and I just gave them, $150,000, that's tax bracket changing. That can make a significant dent in somebody's tax plans for the year. And now I've got to consider 1031 a lot harder to try to help them. You know what I mean?
Well, it seems like just kind of be real about it. Like, considering that our whole mission is to do the mix, right? The 35 non-accredited and the accredited. We're going to very much often have both of those scenarios in the same syndication, at which point in time it could be, complicated to roll it over. Or, here's what I'm thinking though. What if we had our entire fund was made up of self-directed IRAs?
Then it would make
it's easy peasy.
You would never do a 1031 because they're already tax shielded. They're in it. Yeah.
But they're also not expecting that money back.
True, because they can't. I mean,
exactly.
But that is, I mean, but there would be no purpose to doing a 1031 because you'd be like, hey, tax the crap out of it. It doesn't matter. There is no tax because it stays in the account, which is the benefit of the retirement accounts, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm just thinking, like, as far it removes a lot of complications, even if it does render moot the point. I mean, why not just be efficient with it? Just roll it over into a new one. Why not? But I mean, I'm a little bit at not a loss, but it's just like, it just seems like it's at a certain point, like within, I guess, like a year of when you're going to start trying to sell or whatever, you really got to just start doing the math and the homework and the legwork of like reaching out to investors and asking them what they think about this. And of course,
to a certain extent,
it's a good time to buy and sell, I guess.
So, for instance, like, to talk specifics, we have a property, an older property that we're going, 4th Avenue, we're probably going to sell in the next 6 months, and we've looked at it, and to use specifics, we raised $320,000 for it. We've returned whatever 75% of that is to investors, so they have very little money left in the deal. So it theoretically it could be a prime. We bought it for $825,000, and we'll probably sell it for anywhere from
$240,000.
Okay, thank you. Yes, there we go. There's $80,000 left in the deal. There we go. We bought it for $825,000. We owe about $800 on it now, $900, something like that, and it's worth probably about 1.5 to 1.7 is what the property would be worth. We could sell it for. So that's a significant chunk of cash that we could bring over. However, being that it was a $320,000 raise initially, nobody cut. There's the biggest investor is an IRA in that one. So they're the only ones who would theoretically get a big enough chunk to to really alter how their tax situation will go in 2025, and that's an IRA. I'm the other big investor in that, and I try to remove my my personal tax situation from investment related, because my tax situation is always goofy. But basically, everybody else in there is in there for $20,000. Even if I doubled or tripled their money, that's not going to change their tax bracket and put them in a bad situation tax wise. They're not going to get hit very hard on those gains, especially if they do, like we talked about earlier, and they reinvest. So even though it may seem like it's a prime, it really doesn't make sense to do. We're not planning to do a 1031 on it, just because those and a lot of times those small investors, $10,000-$20,000 investors, that they'd really like to see that money back. They'll probably reinvest it, some or all of it, but it would make more sense to send the checks back to them, and they could, maybe pay off some credit cards or something with it, and then, invest another portion of it. But it really doesn't, we're not talking big enough numbers to where, okay, people are going to take a huge tax hit on this. Some people may not even, they're small enough investments that they may not even pay capital gains tax on it. If you're below a certain adjusted income every year, you don't pay capital gains tax.
Okay. I didn't realize you didn't pay anything. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is cool.
And that's the incentive.
If you can get your income below that, then it's pretty sweet. We've done it. We've done it once where we were below, because of all the depreciation we were able to add to our, while I was in the military, we ended up below the poverty line and didn't pay capital gains that year. We didn't sell anything, but because it would have bumped us back up. But that's
What you're talking about, it's pegged to the poverty line? It's not just its own line?
No, it's a tax bracket. There's I think it's like 74. I mean, technically, we looked it up because it was funny.
Yeah. I must say,
hey, technically, we're below whatever.
We're not getting below the poverty line.
No, we were below the poverty, because we looked it up, whatever the poverty line was that year. And we're like, our tax records shows that we were, because of all the depreciation write-offs and stuff, we got taxed below the, we got a refund that year or whatever. It was fun, and I like that. My tax records show up we're poor, babe. According to I want the IRS thinking I'm really poor. That's all I
want. Well, so the way that this has been set up is basically cash out or 1031. I mean, basically, if a 1031 doesn't make sense, it's selling cash out. Yep. Right. So I mean, there's no third option here.
No, there wouldn't. Yeah, it's basically what you're deciding between, and like I said, I'm taking into account the investors' situations, their objectives, the market conditions, and all those different things, and that'll help, whether or not it's worth trying for a 1031 or doing a 1031. And then obviously just knowing if I think I can find a property like that.
Now, what happens in a scenario where 60% vote, let's say 61% vote, let's go 1031, and 39% say let's not? That math probably would never work out. We don't have the numbers for that to break down that way, but you know what I mean. Like, yeah. Let's say it's 63-37, right? Let's round it to like 66. Like 2/3 go one, say yes. Yeah. 1/3 says no.
I gotcha.
What do you do with that 1/3?
Well, technically, according to the paperwork, we're allowed to basically overrule them and say, I would feel uncomfortable doing that. So more than likely what we would do is we would try to buy them out.
Right. Yeah.
With other people from the investor pool first, and then, or maybe even me as the manager personally buying them out. That's something that you would look at doing, but because I wouldn't feel comfortable basically forcing people to do something with their money they didn't want to do. That's not a situation that in my opinion, it would need to be about 100% maybe. And then, if there was one person who just, for whatever reason wanted their money back.
Well, then buying out becomes easy. Yeah. That's exactly. A lot simpler. So, yeah.
In that scenario, that's how I see that going.
Yeah, I mean, if it was 90-10 or something, like, then you're like, okay, this is no problem. But that's why I ask about, like, if it was like literally just like, oh boy, we're
that would be a pretty good indicator that we probably shouldn't do it in that case.
Yeah, right. Because, well, yeah, like you said, there's other options for the people who may really want the rollover. They have other ways, so it's not the end of the story, or the end of the options for them. It's not like they're like, it's either this 1031 or they take a bath.
Yeah, no, it's exactly.
Well, can you just go ahead and work on us getting in this scenario where we just roll the money over and just build equity and just everyone just makes more and more money? Can you just? I'm just hearing a lot of excuses from you, Matthias, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
No, it does seem interesting though that it does take a particular market scenario in which it's both good time to sell and a good time to buy. Now, I mean, you can move local markets. That would be one thing I would assume you could do, and I think
Yeah,
we've
you
run
could
up
do it
against
anywhere.
that.
Yeah, I mean, it probably needs to be in the
I'm just
US
saying,
actually, but
well, realistically, it's not like it's going to be a great time to sell and buy in the same market, like all the time.
it could be. And it also depends on if you've got a property that's a value add property that's at a discount for, whatever reason, like what we target, that would be a scenario where it's more driven by if it's a good time to sell the property. Because what you don't want to do is, hey, it's a great buy sign, let's sell something so we get 1031
Right.
into one of these things that I'm identifying. That's a poor reason to decide to sell, I guess is what I'm saying. If everything's cheap, then it's a bad time to sell. If you identify, it's more the seller market. Like, make sure it's a seller's market, a good time to sell the property and capitalize on the market timing, the investment that we've been working on. Okay, cool. Now I got to go identify a property, which is fine in any market. There's always deals out there, but that's the most important market condition, is that you can sell right at the end of an investment. Because if you end up taking it's like when you buy a stock. A stock market crash happens. You've been building. Let's say you bought Nvidia, and you bought it at $2 a share. Now it's at 150 or whatever. But a stock market crash happens, and it's back down to 88. That's a terrible time to sell that stock, right? Even though it's still a good investment over the long term, but wait till it rebuilds from that crash before you sell, kind of thing.
Right.
So.
Gotcha. That makes sense, because if it's a seller's market, presumably you're going to be in a good position to buy because you sold so well that it's not going to be right. Since you're doing them kind of simultaneously, it's not like you're going to sell, then all of a sudden it's even more of a seller's market and you're priced out. It's because it's a rollover. That makes sense.
Yeah, kind of. But also the buying is less important in the market. It's more property specific. So I care less about what the buyer's whether or not it's a buyer's market. I'm not going to buy anything that doesn't make sense to buy. It's the seller's market that I need to make sure it is happening when I sell a property, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I think I'm out of questions about this. It seems like we went through most of it, and it didn't seem like there was really, on the requirements, there's no size requirement or anything, right? It's just a syndication or just a property sale. Can you do this as an individual owner?
You can as an individual owner, but it's the same. That's why you can't 1031 into a syndication, is because it has to be the same, whether it's an LLC or a person. It has to be the same thing buying the same entity, individual or LLC, trust, whatever it is that's buying the new property. It has to be the same entity that's doing the selling and the buying. So yeah, you could do, if you had an investment house, you could do a 1031 out of that house into a bigger house, apartment complex, whatever. You could absolutely do that on a personal level, or if you had it in an LLC, so on.
Okay. All right. So this is, it's versatile in size and a number involved in the party. So that's good to know that it's not just, very specific to certain organizations. Well, I think, like I said, I'm out of questions. So I think unless you got anything else, I think we
covered it. I think the
ready to shut
there's not a lot of there's a lot of it depends answers when it comes to 1031 exchange.
I just think it's better. It's just good for people to know that this is a thing if it comes across their, radar, or with some of the money they have out somewhere or something like that. All right. Well, as always, we appreciate you hanging out and learning with me and learning from Matthias, as I do as well. Again, if you are so inclined, please, a 5-star, like, star, heart, restack, re-X. Well, we're not on Twitter, but you know what I mean. All the things, please do them. Also, if you're wondering, you keep talking about all these things you're learning, Jordan. How much have you actually learned? Keep your eyes peeled, because in the near future, there may just be a live in action test for me. So if you want to see me perhaps humiliate myself, stay tuned. All right. Otherwise, thanks again for hanging out with us. I'm Jordan. That's Matthias. We will talk to you.
See you, everybody.
Next.
This is a story about Billy Joe and Bobby Sue. Two young lovers with nothing better to do. sit around the house, get high and watch a tube. And here's what happened when they decided to cut loose. They headed down to old El Paso. I swear they ran into a great big hassle. Billy Joe shot a man while robbing his castle. Bobby Sue took the money and run. Go on, take the money and run. Billy Mack is a detective down in Texas. You know he knows just exactly what the